Good morning. Long time no see. It is just so much fun to see everyone's faces again on the screens. And some of you will be glad to know that I will not be talking very much. I am here to introduce two powerhouse members of our team in the Teaching and Learning Department, Jess Bryant, who has been our lead for the Teacher Learning Hub for the last 5 years. Jess, is that right? And then Carly Cockrell is our professional learning coordinator. She joined our team about just over a year ago. And I would say that if you don't know Carly, you need to know Carly, because she is an amazing person when it comes to thinking about professional learning and connecting you to professional learning, and is just a real problem solver. So again, Colette Bartow from OPI, the Senior Manager for the Teaching and Learning Department. And I'm so glad to introduce you to Jess and Carly. So please take it away, ladies.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us here at this session. As Colette mentioned, I am Carly Cockrell, and I am the Professional Learning Coordinator for the Office of Public Instruction. And we're here to talk to you about professional development planning to upskill online teaching. We are in a very unique situation in K-12. That is probably the understatement of the decade at this moment. And so we wanted to make sure that you guys had some tools in your toolbox to help upskill your teaching staff. And Jess, I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. Oh, you already had it. I'm sorry. I'm navigating about 3 different screens right now. You know how that goes. Jess, do you want to share a little bit about yourself too?
Oh, sure. Yes, I have 3 screens also, so my camera's here, but I can see you all over here, and my mouse won't work on one all of a sudden, but we're making this work here. So 3 screens is maybe a bad idea, is what I've learned today. My name's Jess Bryant. I grew up on the High Line, so I see some familiar names in here, including Mike Perry. It's always good to see you. I'm just excited to be here. I used to teach high school science in Great Falls, and then just kind of stumbled into this job as what I thought was going to be a holding place until I could get into the Helena School District. And then it turns out I really love it. I really love online learning. I love the hub, adult learning, all of it. So just really excited. I'm really passionate to be talking about all of this today. So I'm glad you're here with us.
And just a little bit about me. I have a background in educating adults. I previously was the faculty development coordinator for the Faculty Development Center at Great Falls College MSU. So it was teaching faculty, and then I was also teaching education courses to pre-service educators, part of their northern program there. And then prior to that, Jess and I didn't know each other, but we were both teaching at Great Falls Public Schools. I've taught pre-K, 3rd and 6th, and then with her higher education experience, we kind of span the entire spectrum here. So hopefully some of the tips that we offer today will be beneficial. All right. So this session we have broken up into 3 specific parts. We're going to be focusing on online learning. And while you may still be doing some packets for kids, we understand that that is a situation that people are planning for. We don't necessarily have time to include that in our presentation today. We're going to be strictly focusing on the online learning skills that educators need to have in order to pivot to effective online instruction. We all kind of know that what happened in the spring was unprecedented and it was emergency style. So we want to help with providing some suggestions to upskill the staff in a way that is going to benefit them and the students once the pandemic actually resolves itself as well. So we'll talk about planning and identifying the skill set gaps and making a professional development plan. ongoing evaluation and evaluating and planning as part of a continual cycle of improvement. And then we have some specific areas of consideration we want to share with you, where you're using the identified skill gaps and what is already available to you to upskill online teaching. Yep. Next slide.
All right. So one of the first things we talk about in planning is to pick a platform. This is really where you can kind of make or break things from the beginning. Some people think that they are giving their teachers freedom and flexibility, thus making them happy by choosing the platform they're most comfortable with. But let's say one student science teacher uses Moodle, their English teacher uses Microsoft Teams, and then their sibling also in the same building, their teacher use Google Classroom. So now you have to teach the first child 2 platforms, the second kid only 1, but their parents then need to be familiar with 3 different platforms. So it's just really creating a lot of work for yourself and for your teachers and for your students. So by picking a consistent platform and tools, you're making it so much easier for your students and your teachers to learn, for the parents to learn, making it easier for the tech team to support, easier for the parents to support their kids, and then easier for you as the administration to provide professional development. Providing PD on one platform, say Google Classroom, is easier than providing it on Moodle, Google Classroom, Teams, Schoology, you know, any number that you could have in there. And the same really goes with tools. Some people get this nice platform, they have one platform everyone uses, and then teachers link to dozens and dozens of different tools, Quizlet, Mentimeter, YouTube. I'm blanking on the others in a moment. But the more you take students off the site, the more tools they have to learn, the more tech support you have to provide for those tools. So it's really helpful when you find a platform that has many tools built in already, or if it doesn't have the tools you need built in, have a select few that your teachers and your students can get comfortable with to use within that platform.
So probably the most, well, all of these steps are important, of course, but one of the things that I think stands out to me the most is we have been in a habit in education of teaching our teachers in ways that we wouldn't even recommend that they teach their students. We do a lot of one-size-fits-all PD. We tend to take some teacher autonomy out of the equation and say, these are the, you know, required trainings you're going to attend. And we tend to not really have an ongoing conversation with our educators to find out what actual gaps they have in their knowledge and adapt our programs to meet those gaps. So with that, also a lot of things that we had heard over the pandemic, you know, whether this was in comments of different articles we had read and things like that, but people were being labeled as, oh, that teacher is good with tech, or that teacher is bad with tech. And also teachers will say that themselves. They will say, I'm just not a techie person. So really this whole online teaching gig is not for me. And so we would encourage that we think about our staff, or even with our students, that it's easy to label people as good with tech or bad with tech. However, there may be skills within the entire big spectrum of technology literacy that people are actually pretty strong at. For example, someone may struggle with creating a video, but they do very well with writing text-based content. And so sometimes we will waste valuable time by placing people into categories that maybe are too broad, and thus we inadvertently waste some of the educators' time by training them on skills that they may already be comfortable performing, or by putting them into courses that are maybe actually above their skill level. And we see time and time again in the classroom that those are the type of behaviors that we actually try to get away from with our students. So there's been a strong shift. Oh, I'm sorry. We have strongly promoted this shift in the classroom as well, but the one size fits all notion of professional development has remained the norm for many districts and schools. And part of the reason is because some schools just really haven't had the opportunity to learn some ways to structure it differently. So with the experience with COVID and online teaching, we do see that there's an immediacy that's required to upskill all educators. And we want to recommend that we, go toward a shift that we so desperately need in teacher professional development and kind of seize the day. I guess that's my call to action here, with this being a branching off point to do that. So one example that I wanted to share is, and you guys have access to these slides, just so you know, they are in our conference, the page, so that if you want to go and take a deeper look at this. Online teaching readiness surveys have been something that universities have often had for their educators to determine what skill sets the teachers already feel they have and what skill sets they need to be almost do some remediation on. So this particular survey that I shared as an example, it's really strong in effective online pedagogy, which we're going to talk more about in a moment. But it also does lack some specifics to the actual technology that Indiana University actually uses. So we would make the recommendation that rather than go and use something that's already pre-made, that your district really take an analysis of the tech platforms that you're going to recommend for all educators to use, and that are going to really be the foundation of your entire tech infrastructure, and make basically a pre-assessment toward those specific tech programs, and also interweave some effective online pedagogy questions, because then you can start to look and map your educators by what they actually need and what they're already effective with. And with that too, is you can build these surveys so that the remediation for some of these tech platforms is built in, because the majority of the tech platforms that we're going to share with you in just a moment, the majority of those tech platforms, the vendor has already created training that is very easy for the educators to take online. All right, Jess, your turn. Or is it mine? Next slide. Okay, so there are a multitude of different professional learning models. And as you're thinking about your professional development plan, you will know how you're going to structure the actual training of people, not just the content that you're going to train, which we'll talk about in a moment, but how you want the training to roll out. And so peer coaching and mentorships keep coming to the very top of evidence-based research in professional development. Full disclosure, there actually hasn't been a ton of research in what works in the professional development space. And the research that has been done has shown that peer coaching and mentorships tend to have the best transformational learning and actual adoption of the different things that you are trying to teach the educators. I actually recently read of a district that is using something that they're calling a ladder cohort, and they're taking 50 teachers that were selected as the mentor teachers in different tech areas. So not necessarily by tech tool, but maybe by a tech standard, which we'll share some ideas in a moment, or online teaching standard. And these teachers have said, I feel like I'm strong in this area and I'm willing to help teachers that need to improve in this area. And so the mentors then are able to work with the educators that have identified themselves independently that they need to work on a particular skill, and they're able to structure a professional development program out of that. Formal instruction is one that often we see in the professional development world, such as bringing in a trainer to a group meeting. These type of things are often more beneficial for skills that you know that all of your teachers will need, such as if you as a district decide that you want to go to some kind of consistent layout of every online course, or where where the public can find links to the lesson plans, for example, in case there was a shutdown. If you needed to teach all of your educators how to do that, then something like this, where there's a formal instruction of everybody, tends to be a good way to get the word out. Now, this is a tiny soapbox moment, and Jess, I'm going to keep the theory part short because we always go too deep into the theory when I'm trying to talk. But transformational learning theory is one of my favorite theories in the entire world. And I want to bring it up because it's related to in the moment problem solving, and teachers are definitely people that want to solve problems in the moment. They don't want to wait for somebody from IT to get back to them so that they can figure out how to save something or how to do something in the tech world. So one of the things that I want to promote, and it is a form of professional development, not necessarily that translates into, renewal units or something like that, but in the moment tutorials and knowledge bases that are developed by people that use the tools or are created from all of the things that the manufacturer can provide to you as far as training materials go, can be absolutely revolutionary to the amount of human capital you have to have within your IT team to help not only the educators, but the students and also the parents. And the students and the parents are the ones that really should be getting the bulk of that attention. They're really our customers in this situation. So the educators, we need to be able to empower themselves to be able to solve those problems in the moment so that they can move on to what really matters, which is the teaching. That's my soapbox moment for now. So Jess, on to you.
No, I think that's great. We have a knowledge base that we've just started implementing for the Learning Hub, and it's been huge in saving us time in answering help tickets and various things that are simple things. I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll answer this question again. But just having that knowledge base is huge, not only for our designers, I guess not as much, but for our students, which are teachers. It's been really helpful. So I think that knowledge base on both the teacher side and even the student parent side can be really, really helpful. It does take some time in the start to make it happen, but it pays dividends in the end. All right, so this one is, I think, often overlooked because it's one of the easier steps and we sometimes take it for granted. But I'm a big proponent of data and evaluation and really looking at how things are working well or not working. So I think it's important to plan for some kind of routine check-in. This can be formal, informal, but add it to your calendars right now. Maybe it's every month, every 6 weeks, once a quarter, just so you can check in with your teachers and see how things are going. What's working, what isn't, both, online learning on your platform, your tech tools, communication between parents and teachers, students and teachers, and then really think about what additional supports are needed, what can be adjusted along the way to help with those gaps or any weaknesses. And then don't forget about the morale of your staff. Check in, how are they doing? How are they feeling? Really promote self-care whenever you can. And it just means so much to teachers that even if you can't take away their work or take away their stress, just the fact that you're checking in on them and that you care about them, I think really goes a long way in supporting them in this challenge of online and remote learning. So then we kind of looked at this. So this is hopefully where the rubber hits the road, I guess is the right phrase. But really 3 buckets of areas for professional development. All of these relate to each other and support each other, but they're important enough to be separately called out. So the first one is platform training. your teachers need to know how to use the platform, or learning won't be very effective, because they'll spend most of their time trying to figure out, how do I post my lesson? How do I make a quiz? Versus actually thinking about good quiz questions, good teaching, good assessment of their students. And kind of the side piece to this is, how are you going to teach students and parents how to use the platform? Is that the job of the school? Is it the individual teachers? But if you have the same platform and each teacher is putting in the work to teach their students about it, then really you should pool those resources, have those teachers get together, share what they've created to take some work off of each other, and go from there. Because once the students, parents, and the teachers all know how to use the platform effectively, then learning is going to go so much smoother throughout the year. The second one, this is really where Carly and I are very passionate and could talk to you for hours about this. And Carly will go into more detail on the next slide, but effective online pedagogy. So this is just like good teaching, but in the online world. It's the same kind of skills, but takes a little extra thought and effort, or I guess purposeful planning, to transfer this into the online world. And then lastly is how to support our specific student populations, whether it's special education, English language learners. A lot of these extra supports, or 504s or IEPs, we kind of did naturally in person, and we adjust instruction as we go, because we can see what the students are doing. We can see what's happening, where they're struggling, the facial expressions, body language, kind of those things, but you can't see that in the online world. And often we think in online learning, okay, we'll get everything set up. I get my platform. Okay, I understand good online teaching. And then we're just so busy in the school year started, and we've kind of forgot about how to support some of these student populations. So again, it can happen, but just take some extra planning, and thoughtful discussions with a team to get ready for that. We're going to give you specifics on all of these here shortly, but first, Carly's going to talk to you a little bit more about effective online pedagogy.
So, full disclosure that effective online pedagogy has been studied, especially in the higher ed space, for a really long time. And there are a lot of opinions about effective online pedagogy, and there tends to be different things that come up time and time again that really are just good teaching practice, regardless of if they're in a face-to-face environment or if they're in an online environment. So I'm going to take this in kind of a different way, where instead of telling you everything you should do, I'm going to tell you some of the things that we have personally seen and that we want to maybe caution, because they haven't been the most effective online learning practices. And what we were doing in the spring was totally emergency style. Now, with that being said, the resource that Jess and I will show you in the next slide, we've included some links to research, only two. I picked two of my top two of research in the effective online pedagogy space, because if you need to, create some justification about, well, why are we now doing this when in the spring we were really focused on doing this, then you can say, well, what we know from the spring that did work and didn't work, that's what we're going forward with. We're making changes there. So the most important thing of this entire situation is COVID obviously is a horrible, horrible situation. However, it has given us an opportunity to shake up education as we know it. And with online pedagogy, and just online instruction in general in the K-12 space, this situation that we're going through right now can only create better teachers in the long term. I truly do believe that, because I do see that educators are going to have more tech literacy after this. than they did going into it as a whole. So traditionally, effective online pedagogy has not been a priority in the traditional K-12 pre-service education. I have been talking with other higher education professors. There's a group that I talk to about once a month, and that was something that they overwhelmingly stated. I was one of the educators that taught the instructional technology course at Great Falls College, and it's, you know, a 1 3-credit course for up and coming K-12 educators. And really, this is something that should be embedded throughout the entire education prep situation, because we are asking our learners to be more tech literate, and we need to model that same behavior. Also, effective online pedagogy is not tool dependent. I've heard this time and time again, and it is true. Tech is not a learning outcome. What you actually are having the students do and demonstrate is a learning outcome. For example, your learning outcome isn't going to be, I want my students to be able to create a Flipgrid. It's going to be, I want my students to be able to create, remix, present, those type of things. So I think that sometimes we focus on the bright and shiny and think about, oh, this, you know, is something that is just a little bit more better than the previous thing that I was using, but then it comes with its own whole source of potential problems and hasn't been given a very good test run, things like that. So really being focused on the tools that you're using and not just kind of having almost a free-for-all in the tech space, I would recommend really considering that, because effective online pedagogy is difficult to do when you're trying to help so many different platforms. And then finally, effective online pedagogy is focused on theories, principles, but most importantly, student-focused instructional design and thinking about how are my students going to interact with this. Effective online pedagogy really boils down to, I need to remove barriers so my students can get to the learning at hand. So if we're asking students to log into multiple platforms, if we're asking students to use a tech tool that perhaps they don't even have transferable skills because they've never experienced that tech tool before, instead of having, you know, options of, oh, well, maybe we can do this within a different way and being flexible, that can really be a barrier for students. So I do also want to mention the NSQOL standards. And Jess, I'm wondering if you can go ahead and click on that for us. Hopefully she can.
Yes.
So
my mouse keeps getting stuck on them.
I could possibly throw it into the chat. We wanted to, and we also include this link on the handout that we're about to show you, the NSQOL. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Cole. I love when she's Vanna. If you would like to click on the link in the chat. Oh, there it goes. So the National Standards for Quality Online Education. If any of you have been in the higher ed space for a while, you've heard of a company called Quality Matters. Quality Matters is often what universities use to evaluate whether their programs and their courses have effective online teaching in them. There was a recognition that that was a little bit less prevalent in the K-12 space. So they have made they've partnered with the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance, Quality Matters has, and has created frameworks for K-12. And the thing about these standards that I find really beneficial is it really breaks down all of the habits that we would expect an online educator, an effective online educator to have. So if you look at online teaching, for example, and I won't go through this because I know that you guys can, you know, read them yourselves. But for example, standard A, professional responsibilities. has different standards, such as they can meet the credentials in their field, they're a reflective practitioner, they demonstrate knowledge of the role of online learning in preparing learners to participate as global citizens. And this really interweaves a lot with like Montana ePass, and also interweaves a lot with ISTE standards. So if you've ever heard of those, these are the type of things that you can look toward to almost give I can statements in a way to your educators about what effective online teaching looks like. So that is a very powerful resource. And we have some dreams of where we'd like to go with these in the future as well at the OPI to make them more prevalent within the K-12 space. So yeah, that was quite a bit of information, and I think probably the best thing that we can do next, Jess, is show them the takeaway reference list that we have created, so that you don't have to keep all of this in your brain right now. You can have something at your fingertips.
Yes, so we spent some time creating a PD list for you. And I really wish this could be, you know, include the best of every area of those online teaching standards that we just covered, but we just didn't have enough time to create a list to match back to all of those standards. So this is linked in the presentation, as well as on the SAM page where the link for this presentation was. There's a link to this takeaway list, and it's a Google Doc, so you can download it into Word, edit it, and use it for your own staff. You can make a copy in your own Google Drive and edit away there. So we started with, to match our 3 buckets of areas of need, we started with the platform training. So we found material for Canvas, Google Classroom, Moodle, Schoology, Seesaw, and Teams, and looked for both what those platforms provide themselves, and then maybe some other like external resources to support those as well. So I feel like there's so much out there that it's hard for you to go through and vet everything before giving it to your teachers. So this is a good starting place for that basic platform. And some of these have like a fundamentals basic level, and then as well as advanced level. So it's really nice to then give your teachers that option so they can self-select into those areas of where they need the most support.
And then obviously, because so many of the additional tools that you might interweave into your learning management system is so varied, there was no way we could include all of those, but most of those different tech companies have their own training too that you could factor into this as well. And I'd like to encourage that a lot of the training resources that we've placed in here could be something that you also make your pre-assessment, where you're identifying skill gaps amongst your staff, and maybe you're doing that in Google Forms, but you could make that something where you could say, okay, if you answered no, that you currently, you know, do not have a good method of file management, electronic file management, you have a resource for them to go to where they could watch some videos and learn some of those fundamental tools before they even start coming to the other sessions. That maybe requires a foundational skill set of different techniques. We're personally even doing the same thing. So then we have a section that's related to effective online pedagogy. First of all, the Teacher Learning Hub, which Jess runs with us. We did create an introduction to online course design. It's a 1 renewal unit. We've had quite a number of teachers take it, but it is there for you. And we also have things like digital accessibility fundamentals, so that you can make sure that all of the students that are receiving the online instruction are able to interact with it accordingly. Standards-based grading, we have a part 2 coming soon. universal design for learning, digital tools and digital learning. That includes, you know, maybe you have a student that needs support with time management or something like that. You could take some of those recommendations that are made in those courses and see if those would help adapt maybe to a student's IEP, or even students that just, you know, have varied learning needs. So I won't go through all of those, but there are quite a few. And then also we do have the OPI Professional Learning Opportunities Portal. There are so many providers across the state, and they are really working hard to answer the call of related to online instruction, and also knowing that they maybe can't come and meet with your staff face to face. So a lot of those providers are changing their face-to-face models to online models. So we are doing our best to keep that up to date, but we do recommend that you check that out if you're looking for particular topics to help train your staff. Digital Promise is a great micro-credential provider. And if you attended Colet's previous session on IMS Global and data interoperability standards, they are also big into that space. So Digital Promise has a lot of free micro-credentials and webinars, and they are really focused on innovation, equity for all student populations, and closing the digital learning gap, which we've heard so much about during this COVID situation. We have a lot more. ISTE University, Learning Forward COVID webinar series, things from the regional education laboratories, which are tied in with the U.S. Department of Education, Remote Learning 101, which was recommended by our Career and Technical and Adult Education unit, and then a really innovative math educator that demonstrates how she has been completely online in K-12. And then, of course, finally, at the very bottom, we have linked some things that we think are important for you to consider when you're thinking about how to do this, some best practices, and then, you know, fostering self-regulation and online learning, which tends to be one of the most difficult parts of online learning, and not being face-to-face with the student. And then our partners with the Montana Digital Academy have some great resources for you to consider. And then finally, the National Standards for Quality Online Learning can be a great starting point in thinking about what you really want to see from the staff in regards to online teaching and learning. That was a lot.
That's such good stuff though. And we even, like some of these up here, excuse my scrolling, like the ISTE Learning Forward and REL webinars, there's so many good ones. And we wanted to pick out very specific, like say, do this one, do this one. But we really want you to be able to customize it to what your school needs and what your community needs, instead of us telling you which ones are the best ones.
Right.
So just taking 10 minutes to kind of browse through the topics, narrowing it down, you know, to what you see your staff needing. I think you can really find some great resources in these. All right, back to the presentation. You've probably been seeing some closed captioning, some auto closed captioning at the bottom, but it's only picking up my microphone. So I saw some random words from Carly towards the end there. It's something that we're just playing around with a little bit. So that's also something you could use in, or teachers could use in their online sessions. It's just PowerPoint Live. It comes with a paid subscription to Office 365. Going the wrong way. So closing thoughts, and then we'll have time for questions. So first, just more time up front is really going to pay off throughout the year. And a lot of what we said might sound like a lot of work, but you guys are all used to doing a lot of work. That's why you are the administrators for your schools, because you're good at that stuff. And there's really going to be that high initial cognitive load for you and your teachers, but this really lessens as they get further into the year and more used to this technology. But laying that solid foundation to start will just pay dividends as you go. then sell it to your staff, especially those naysayers. What they build now will be reusable. Let's say COVID settles down, we open fully, in person, there aren't those concerns, but then it flares back up again, and you have some kids who want to stay home because they're at risk or their families are at risk. Well, then they've already got an online setup that they can use for those students. Or Jimmy goes skiing and breaks his leg and can't come to school for a couple weeks. Now he's got this. Or a family takes a long vacation, they've got this online setup that they can refer to. And I mentioned this earlier, but really check in on your teachers, see how they're doing. Because if the teachers are happy, then it will be much easier for them to, to work with their students and kind of deal with the stress that their students are feeling of having to be remote and working online and dealing with these new technologies. Just let teachers know that you're thinking about them, that you appreciate all their hard work. When I was at Great Falls High, I had a couple different principals there, Jane Gregoire, Heather Hoyer, Fred Anderson, and they were all really great at this. And I just love how often they would just show up in my classroom to chat during lunch or prep, or little even appreciation gifts they got us along the way. But having that strong, supportive administrator was just huge. And that's why I loved teaching and loved being at Great Falls High so much, was because of the great administrators that I worked under.
So as you're thinking about this, and you've been thinking about all of these things that you've been learning at this conference and thinking about, where is the time? How do I grapple with all of this? Your teachers, and you know this too, they're thinking the exact same thing. How the heck am I planning for face-to-face? How am I planning for hybrid? How am I planning for remote? This is a lot of work, and everybody that knows education knows just how hard everybody is working. It's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. A lot of people are running around saying, obviously, what happened in the spring was not what we want to do going forward into the fall. And so we've learned a lot of lessons there. But I want to explain that people specifically go to school to get master's degrees in effective online instruction. It requires time, and it requires a lot of dedication to really honing that craft. So being patient with your staff and being patient with yourself when you're just like, man, this tech just is not working for me. Thinking about how to remove those barriers so that you can support your staff and your IT team can support will really help with, I think, that perfectionism that we all feel, that we have to be experts in everything. After all, we're the teachers and the educational leaders. So take that off of yourself a little bit if you're willing to do that. The next thing, clear communication. Clear communication goes a long way with your staff, with your students, with your parents. At the keynote, we talked about making sure to share your story. And so clear communication in this process is going to reduce some of the human capital demands that are going to happen toward you, but are also going to happen with the teachers if they're not quite clear with their students and their parents. So really thinking about how you can get on the front end of the communication rather than the reactive end can help so that the human capital demands aren't as high and don't contribute to any potential burnout during this situation. And then finally, professional development autonomy. I mentioned it at the beginning, where your educators all have strengths and they all have areas of opportunity, just like students do. And so if you're making something, and it looks like it was already mentioned in the chat, Colette mentioned one thought is creating a menu of choices based on the known skill sets in your staff. That's exactly what I was going to say here. A lot of districts have been doing that, where they'll have like professional development menus, and they'll say, okay, these are all the different opportunities to choose from. We're offering these for PIR. We want you for PIR time, we want you to pick within these different tracks, kind of similarly to what you're experiencing right now in this conference. Although you're going to be using a lot less synchronous training than perhaps you are receiving in this conference when you're actually doing your professional development with your staff. But also asking your staff, what professional development have you taken, maybe independently, because all of your educators that are wanting to learn on their own time and solve problems on their own time, that's the group to tap into and say, what professional development has been working for you and what would you recommend, because they often have things to suggest. So allowing them to choose and not think about it in, okay, I know I have to offer professional development for PIR. It has to be this specific thing. You can make a menu to choose from and work that way. And if you ever want some strategies on how to make that work, please feel free to contact me, because it's what I'm passionate about. Everybody hates bad PD. So those are just some of our closing thoughts. And I know that we have until, I believe it's 11:45. Yeah, Jason, it is hard for type A administration. Yes. But you're reflecting on that. So we appreciate your honesty. Jess, if you wouldn't mind going to our last slide here, we do have our email addresses, but it looks like we were able to finish up a little bit early. So I'm wondering if we can just open the floor for some questions and some conversation about what is a really, truthfully, just tough topic. Jess, do you have anything final that you want to mention before we open it up for questions?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm so impressed with how all the administrators have handled this constant change and not having exact answers and having to just roll with it. So I admire what you do. I'm glad I am not in your shoes, but I'm glad that we have great people like you to do it for your teachers and for your students and for your community. But I'm also curious, like Carly said, if you have questions, but then if you have any of these things that you've done that we've talked about that have worked well or even not worked well that you'd like to share with the group.
Yeah, and I just add, I'd love to hear your voices. We've had some, extended period of time where you've heard Carly talking and Jess talking and a little bit from me. But as we learned through our sharing sessions last spring, the smartest person in the room is the room. And so if you can share your priorities or greatest needs, maybe we can help support those, or maybe a colleague in the room can help. So just like to invite you to open up the mic and share your voice, or through the chat as well. What are those things that you need help with or that you'd like to help others with?
Colette, it's Christina Barbasciano here in Drummond.
Hey, Christina.
Hi, guys. I know that good teaching is good teaching, but there are definitely certain strategies and things that we need to consider when we're working with special ed students. And so it would be very helpful to me if there was some way, if there was a kind of a branch or a specialty of, are there specific strategies or programs that are more likely to work with some of our more vulnerable and at-risk students in our special ed programs?
No, that's great. And I didn't have a chance to watch the presentation that Jennifer Klein, our state special education director, did yesterday, but that's one that I want to return to and see what I can glean out of that as well.
We are also working on a course that we're calling Creating an Online Environment Where All Students Thrive, that starts with those good strategies, but at the end branches off to social emotional learning, English learners, and special ed. And we worked a little bit with Georgia, has a version of their own teacher learning hub where they have some training specifically around IEPs and 504s online. So we're borrowing some of those pieces and working with our special ed division to get some solid guidance in there. I wanted to have that course out in the next couple weeks, but honestly, it's going to be probably about a month before I can get that course ready and out.
In some of the effective pedagogy section of the professional development takeaway list that we provided, there are some specific opportunities there for addressing special education and online teaching, and not just webinars either. The digital promise micro credentials definitely bring a lot to the equity and access to education for all learners that I would encourage anybody to take a look at. But then also in one of our courses, which is UDL Digital Tools, we talk a lot about specific student needs and some of the tools that could help meet those needs. But we also understand that just taking the tool and giving students access to a tool doesn't always meet the requirements of an IEP or a 504. So, but those can give some suggestions of different scenarios that may have a digital tool that could work in the online teaching realm for a student's IEP or 504.
Jason, I think your question is, I mean, it's something that we're all thinking about. How do we gear up for the multitude of scenarios? And my really kind of blunt answer is we have to have that digital platform as the basis for equitable access and an equitable delivery of our curriculum and instruction. So I think it's not an either or, it's starting with having your digital ecosystem solid, and then that allows you to be able to pivot. If you've got a certain subgroup of kids who are going to commit to remote learning from home, they have to be able to access. If you've got smaller groups of kids in a classroom, you have to be able to deliver the same English 1 or the same Spanish 2, the same content and the level of instruction, regardless of where the kid is sitting in the classroom or at home. And so that's one thing I guess I can't emphasize enough, is having that digital house in order, so that regardless of the choice that kids or families make, or the choice that's made for them through exposure to COVID, that they have a clear pathway to access the instruction and the curriculum that we know we can deliver through upskilling our teachers and having that digital house in order.
And one thing that may be helpful is to partner some of your teachers. If you have 3 teachers that are teaching English, they can share that workload. They don't all have to develop completely unique online courses. They can do it together, share pieces, share units. I know that's harder at a small school because you might only have one English teacher for middle school and high school, but see if there's a neighboring town or neighboring school that uses the same platform you do, or at least something similar, that you can share some of those resources back and forth. I think that's something I talk about with, there's a Moodle roundtable group. I talk with other schools and states who use Moodle a lot in North Dakota and Michigan, and they really want to find other teachers from around the US or the state who are working in Moodle to build courses for students and share those back and forth. Moodle, Canvas, you can share easily back and forth this course files. I don't know about Schoology, I'm not as familiar. Google Classroom, you can do some of it, I think. But just finding a way to share that workload and collaborate with other teachers who are having to do that same work, I think could possibly help.
And it did come up in the chat. Funding is always a concern for how are you going to make this work, especially if you're wanting to bring something in like Better Lesson was mentioned, for example, has great reviews, and it's a mentorship program. It works very well especially for rural communities that maybe do not have a subject matter expert or somebody that can mentor a specific educator. So if you are thinking about, well, how in the world are we going to fund these type of things? I put a link in the chat. We do have a professional learning website that is specific just for administrators and thinking about how to do your professional development programming. And it does include things about funding considerations on there. And we also should probably take some of what we just presented and put it on there as well, so that it's available in a one place location too. So I just wanted to mention that. Let's see, it looks like Joe mentioned we discussed just broadcasting the in-class teaching to those at home, but there are FERPA concerns plus union issues with video recording in the classroom. Yes.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, being aware of those sideboards and those concerns is, I mean, that has an absolute impact on the decisions that we make on how those classrooms are even set up. So if it were viable to do live streaming of certain courses, you know, there are ways like even Paul Anderson was showing us yesterday about how to set up your basically your camera and your angle, and so that there's a focus on what the learning activity is, as opposed to just, you know, setting a camera up in a corner of a classroom and having that be the proxy for online instruction. So I think, you know, it goes back to maybe taking a look at those online learning standards, thinking about classroom setup, the technology that you have available, protecting student privacy as we know. I mean, that's a non-negotiable for us, as well as you know, those agreements with our staff and their collective bargaining. So I think, you know, peeling back to how do we deliver good educational opportunity to our kids, it means that we have to pay attention to the skill set and the physical setup of classrooms, or as I've said, and you know my bias, you know, having that digital learning ecosystem built out in a way that you know, we're not running into these walls. That takes the planning on the beginning side, and thinking about over the long term. And that's something I just want to kind of maybe leave us with too. Carly made the point to say that, you know, it's not going to be perfect, and we need to be okay with that. But I do think that we need to think about kind of interim goals. You know, by January of this year, where do we need to be with evaluating what we've done in delivering online remote education? And then from that learning, what do we want to look different a year from now? Because believe it or not, we are going to get to a year from now looking at the 21-22 school year before we know it. So being thoughtful and thinking about what are the lessons that we can learn, and what can we take from what we find out in the next 3 months or 6 months. How are we going to improve upon that foundation so that we're even more ready for whatever comes towards us for the following school year? So I know it's easy to get tunneled in the pressure of dealing with right now what we need to do in 2 or 3 weeks when our school doors open, but have that long view as well. Don't lose sight of the goals that you set before yourselves before COVID even happened, and see if you can dream forward that towards that, and really create the opportunity with what we're learning to make sure that you get to that vision that you have for your district and your community. So take a lot of heart and encouragement in these tough times. You're all resilient and you're all tremendous leaders. So take some comfort in that and be looking forward for sure, and know that we're your partners and that we'd love to hear from you and further this conversation. So thank you so very much for being part of this today.
Yes, thank you very much for allowing us to speak with you guys about what we're passionate about, and we're here to help with your professional learning needs, and just let us know what you need.
Yes, second everything that Carly and Colette just said. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Colette, Carly, and Jess. We really appreciate you. We're going to wrap up a little bit instead of going back to a main group. We're just going to wrap up right here. So thanks everyone for attending our virtual conference. There were a few award winners from the exhibit hall. There will be more announced later. We'll send it out in an email. But Silverback gave, I think, a gift card to Mike Ehinger. Horace Mann gave a $250 Donor's Choose gift to Brockton School District, so Cindy Glavin. And they will reach out to you if you are the winner of those. Remember to complete an evaluation. We'll keep track of those and then send your renewal units out to you the end of October. This morning, we've been updating the web pages, and some of the recordings from yesterday are already embedded on the sites. So go check those, but we'll send an email to you when everything has been uploaded, but feel free to go visit those web pages. Also, in today's session that we're just finishing, the links that Colette was putting in the chats, I've put those on this session web page too. So everything's there from this session. Let's see, what else? Oh, mark your calendars for next year. It's Sam's 50th anniversary, so we'll be celebrating that during our hopefully not virtual Administrators Institute, July 26th to the 28th. We hope right here in Helena, live. If you're attending the Leaders Professional Learning Program Summit tomorrow, you access it exactly the same way. Go to the conference landing page and scroll down to the bottom, and there's the link for the session page. So that starts at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So thanks everyone, we really appreciate it.